10 years before he made his name as the inscrutable, hooded overlord of the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick was handed his first chance as an NFL head coach by the Cleveland Browns, a historic franchise wounded by years of failure. A giant in the sport's formative years, the Browns had never made the Super Bowl, and a run of spectacular near misses in the 1980s had shattered morale. After a 313 season in 1990, the owner, Art Modell, lured Belichick from the New York Giants, where he had just won the Super Bowl as defensive coach with a game plan so good that it's now in the Hall of Fame. Belichick set out to build a rugged team built for the hard winters on the shore of Lake Erie, where the team shared a rundown municipal stadium with the Cleveland Indians. Progress was slow. The Browns posted narrow losing records in his first 3 seasons, but the wily head coach engineered a run to the playoffs in 1994. Despite frequent clashes with Modell over money, Belichick had the Browns primed for a Super Bowl run. Nearly 75,000 fans poured into the Cleveland Stadium to see the win over Kansas City, which sealed a 31 start. Off the field, Modell was watching revenues fall after the Indians' departure. Rumblings began that the owner was about to take a hammer to the sturdy foundations Belichick had built. On the 6th of November, Modell announced his intention to relocate the Browns to Baltimore. From dreaming of a Super Bowl, ever-faithful Browns fans were facing the death of their team. Cleveland lost 9 of their next 10 games, falling apart on the field as fans turned to mutiny. The final home game of the season against Cincinnati became a riot. Spectators tore the stands to pieces, raw grief giving way to rage. Somewhere in the NFL's corridors of power, the anguish poured out that day struck a nerve. The fans won their battle to keep the team in Cleveland. Modell's Baltimore team became a new franchise, though they had to wait until 1999 for their return. The Browns avoided a death sentence, but for the expansion side, the ghosts of what might have been are everywhere. The relocated, rebranded Baltimore Ravens have won 2 Super Bowls. Belichick, fired by Modell over the phone, learned from the chaos in Cleveland to build a dynasty at New England. He slipped on a 5th Super Bowl ring this year. The Browns have won 1 of their last 24 games. To Doncaster Rovers 199,798. The free market rules in English football, which means pretty much anyone with a bit of spare cash can buy themselves a club. Some teams find their perfect match, a steady hand on the tiller that unleashes a club's true potential. Doncaster got Ken Richardson. Under his ownership, Rovers lost their league status, their main stand to a suspicious fire, and their dignity. Richardson had a curious hands-off approach, rarely investing in or even visiting the club's rundown Bellevue home but regularly interfering with team affairs. He would fax in team talks from the Isle of Man with missives like "Show the bastards" scrawled on them. After a string of managers walked out, he installed a general manager, Mark Weaver, to do his bidding. By 1998, Doncaster's Bellevue ground had seen better days. Photograph John Gillespie. With Richardson's cash cut off and home gates dwindling to below 1,000, Doncaster descended into little more than a Sunday League side. A Channel 5 documentary followed the farcical final acts of the 199,798 season, from angry supporters' meetings to players training in the park, and getting trapped in the dressing room by a faulty door. On the pitch things were no better. As the owner focused on selling off their ground, Doncaster's motley crew of loanies and youth players were left to sink slowly, finishing the 46-game season with a record 34 defeats. They lost 71 to Cardiff City, and 80 at Leyton Orient. In the League Cup, Nottingham Forest beat them 101 on aggregate. Coach Danny Bergara tried swapping players' numbers in a tactical move, outfoxing only himself. With Richardson absent, fans turned on Weaver, a yes-man installed above his station to do the owner's bidding. At the final home game, fans staged a mock funeral for a club they expected to fold. Weaver turned up having vowed to stay away. The police advised him to leave for his own safety. As the club fell apart, police were closing in on Richardson over his involvement in a fire in the summer of 1995 that had almost gutted the main stand at Bellevue. He was eventually charged with offering a former soldier £10,000 to start the fire, part of a harebrained scheme to get his hands on lucrative land. Detectives labeled him the type that would trample a 2-year-old to pick up a 2p piece. From the ashes, Doncaster at least found the owner they deserved. As Richardson was sent to jail, the local businessman John Ryan stepped in and set about reviving the club. 10 years after their season in hell, with a new ground built and Bellevue left behind, Rovers beat Leeds United at Wembley to seal promotion to the Championship. 3 Vince Spadea 2000. Some tennis players are driven by rivalry, or a quest for sporting immortality. Vince Spadia's motivation was more practical. "No one wants to travel the world to lose money," he wrote in 2006. "Tennis players are paid to win." The year 2000 was a lean one for Spadia, a journeyman pro who had just enjoyed a breakthrough season. He had reached number 19 in the world, and upset Andre Agassi on his way to the 1999 Australian Open quarter-finals. Spadia flew out to Melbourne seeking a repeat run to kickstart flagging form, but lost in the first round to the world number 95, Adrian Voney. That early exit proved the catalyst for a historic run of defeats. Winter turned to spring, the hard courts gave way to clay, and Spadia lost and lost again. By the time he reached Wimbledon, he had lost 21 straight matches. In the first round, he drew the British number 2, Greg Rusedski. His parents decided to stay in Florida. What happened next was predictable in its own way. Spadia overcame 2 lost tiebreaks and a 2-hour rain delay to win the deciding set 97. The shame shifted to Rusedski, and for the watching world, that's where the story ended. "I can lose to anyone, but I can battle," a jubilant Spadia told the crowd. "Because I got game." Vince Spadia, left, finally walks to the net a winner after shocking Greg Rusedski at Wimbledon. Photograph Getty Images. How much game as it turned out? Not much. Spadia lost his next match at Wimbledon, crashed out of the US Open and Olympics at the first hurdle, and lost in Tokyo to a player ranked outside the top 300. Dropping down to the Challenger circuit in autumn to regain his form, he lost his first match 61-60. Spadia ended the year with 3 wins and 28 losses at ATP Tour level, and a world ranking of number 237. He would fight his way back up the rankings in tenacious style, but his losing run still hit him where it hurt, his pocket. Spadia has claimed that his season was so bad, he actually lost money on the tour. For him, that was the true price of failure. For Ferrari, 1980 dominance in Formula One can be a fragile thing. With cars constantly tweaked and tuned up to stay ahead of the field, a wrong turn in the garage can wipe out years of progress. McLaren found that out in 2015, when a switch to Honda engines saw the historic team, with Fernando Alonso and Jenson Button on board, reduced to a laughing stock. In 1980, Ferrari made a more subtle change, updating the 312T car that had won them 4 of the previous 6 constructors' titles. The upgrade proved to be an unmitigated calamity in a tumultuous season blighted by safety concerns. The first 2 races, in Argentina and Brazil, saw drivers including Ferrari's defending world champion, Jody Scheckter, threaten a boycott over track conditions. 1980 proved the turning point for the sport, with Bernie Ecclestone winning a power struggle with the F1 chief, Jean-Marie Ballester. It also proved a watershed for the Scuderia, who were outclassed in the early races as Williams and Brabham emerged as title contenders. Ferrari suffered reliability issues with their retooled engine, and did not pick up a point until Scheckter came 5th at Long Beach. While his teammate Gilles Villeneuve at least battled for the odd podium place in a chronically underpowered car, Scheckter took only 2 points all year, failed to even qualify for 1 race, and promptly retired at the end of the season. Schecter's sharp exit was, however, more than an indictment of his car. He had once been the bad boy of F1, causing crashes and winding up rivals with his daredevil antics. Then, in 1973, he was first on the scene at teammate François Severt's fatal crash at Watkins Glen. What he saw changed him profoundly, and, after winning the world title ahead of Villeneuve in 1979, he saw no reason to put himself at risk any longer. Villeneuve was not so fortunate. The Canadian was killed in a qualifying crash in Belgium 2 years later, perhaps the highest-profile victim of F1's most unsafe era. Scheckter spoke at his funeral in a rare, fleeting return to this spotlight. The South African retired to Hampshire, where he now runs an organic farm. Ferrari switched to a brand new car in 1981, and promptly returned to the podium places in the Constructors' Championship. The previous season still left its mark. They did not produce another world champion driver until Michael Schumacher, some 20 years later. Jody Scheckter in action at the Austrian Grand Prix, where he finished in 13th place. Photograph Bernard Cahier. Getty Images. 5 Milan 198,182 under the leadership of Arrigo Sacchi and Fabio Capello. Milan's 198,794 vintage won 14 trophies in 7 seasons, blending Italian defensive nous with Dutch attacking flair to formidable effect. That golden age was forged in response to the club's greatest embarrassment, only 5 years earlier. For Serie A's elite clubs, not winning the Scudetto is failure enough. They rarely have cause to consider the other end of the table. Internazionale have never been relegated, and Juventus' only demotion came after the Calciopoli investigation. Milan were also relegated off the field once, in 1980, after the Totonero match-fixing scandal. Milan bounced straight back and expected to breeze up the table, with a defense built around Franco Baresi and their new striker Joe Jordan banging in the goals. But Baresi missed 4 months with an injury, and in his absence Milan picked up 8 points in 12 games. Jordan was the first Milan player to score that season, in their 8th game. Milan had returned to a league that was no longer afraid of them, and a run of 1 point from games against Catanzaro, Ascoli and Como appeared to confirm the unthinkable relegation on the field. The youth coach Italo Galbiati replaced Gigi Radis, and the club still had a chance of survival on the final day at Cesena. After going 20 down early on, the team with 18 league goals all season found 3 in 15 minutes to grab victory. With Genoa behind at Napoli, Milan appeared to have avoided eternal shame, and their fans raced onto the pitch to celebrate. Then Genoa won a last-gasp corner, and scored. Milan fans maintain that the Napoli goalkeeper, Luciano Castellini, intentionally threw the ball out to hand Genoa that corner. You can judge for yourself here. Either way, this was not an experience the Rossoneri ever planned on repeating. After securing an immediate return, Silvio Berlusconi bought the club, brought in Sacchi and signed Ruud Gullit, Frank Rijkaard and Marco van Basten. The rest is history. 6. Derbyshire 1920 County cricket's meticulous record-keeping means no landmark season of any description will be forgotten. Which, for Derbyshire in particular, is a shame. After regaining first-class status in 1894, they failed to win a county championship match in 3 separate seasons: 1897, 1901 and the historically abysmal 1920 campaign. Harry Storer went from a dismal season with Derbyshire to wearing England caps as a footballer. Photograph Popper Getty images with county cricket returning to normality after the First World War. The captain, John Chapman, fielded 38 different players across 16 completed matches. It was an early example of over-rotation. Derbyshire lost them all. On 6 occasions, their opposition only had to bat once to get the job done. This was a team caught between 2 eras. The previous captain, George Buxton, had retired, but came back to reorganize the side for the following season. Billy Bestwick, a 45-year-old seamer with a kick-arm and quicker temper, featured in only 1 match. They were replaced by newcomers who would go on to better things. The wicket-keeper Harry Elliott went on to earn England caps, as did the batsman Harry Storer. In football, Guy Jackson, a 24-year-old batsman with a season-high score of 14, later became the county captain under the tutelage of Buxton. According to Wisden, Jackson steadily raised the standard within the county, laying the foundations for the 1936 season, when Elliott and Storer helped deliver Derbyshire's only county championship. Sign up to our weekly email, The Recap, here, showcasing a selection of our sport features from the past 7 days.